Welcome to the Flourish with Neural Retraining podcast. I'm your host, Madeline Lowry, founder of Twin Cities Neural Retraining and a certified MAP method practitioner specializing in anxiety, sensitivities, and chronic symptoms and conditions. Join me for episode 69, where we talk with my client Susan about her experience with the MAP method and how MAP helped her to overcome 10 plus years of chronic illness, including fatigue, brain fog, and sleep issues. Hear how she came to understand the connection between trauma and chronic illness, and how MAP method sessions proved more effective than other modalities she tried, including somatic work, counseling, EMDR, and tapping. As always, we must disclaim that the information we share in the podcast is for educational purposes only. As MAP method practitioners, we do not diagnose or treat disease. Instead, we work with the mind to optimize health. Now, let's hear from Susan. So welcome, Susan. I'm really excited to have you join me to have this conversation.
Thank you, Madeline. I'm happy to be here.
So, Susan, you've had we've done a lot of sessions together already, about 17 sessions over the last 8 months. But I'd like to start out by taking you all the way back to the beginning and have you talk about, how you heard about this obscure method called the MAP method of advanced neural retraining and why you decided to give it a try.
Sure. Well, I first saw it on social media and I requested info, but I never opened up the email. And I totally it was just off my radar, I guess. And then a year later, I saw it again on social media and I thought, oh, that looks interesting. And so I clicked it and I started learning more about it. And I thought, this sounds a little bit familiar. So I checked my emails and sure enough, I had requested that email originally a year prior. And I can just say now, I know I'm skipping ahead, but I really wish I hadn't waited a year to open up that email. So I read about it and I scoured the MAP Coaching Institute's website, trying to understand it and the best I could and learn what it was all about. And then I saw your picture and your bio on the website and I decided to go with you. I had struggled for many years with chronic illness, 10 plus years, really, really struggled. And I knew that it went back to trauma. And, I had complex, trauma, say birth to about 20 years old. And I had seen many, many doctors throughout those 10 years, many specialists, been given lots of labels. And nobody could really tell me why. A doctor would say, well, 2 people can get bitten with a tick that has Lyme and one person doesn't develop symptoms and the other does, this type of thing. And I'm like, okay, well, why? And eventually I realized it had something to do with the mind. And a couple doctors actually confirmed that. I went to a chronic illness specialist and he said, I don't know, it was like 85 or 90% of his patients have a large trauma history. And I thought, okay, that's interesting, but how do we get rid of the trauma from the body? So that was my quest to try to find out how to get rid of this trauma from my body that was my body was hanging on to this trauma. And so I looked at a few more things. I'm a researcher, so I'm always trying to get to the bottom of, the question and try to find out the source. And I think the last few modalities I looked at was some somatic work. And I actually did go back to some counseling. I did counseling on and off throughout my whole life. But it just really wasn't getting me the results I wanted. It didn't really feel like it was healing. And so when I rediscovered MAP, I kind of thought, this is my last ditch effort. Because I kind of had a few days before that, I kind of basically given up. And I just thought, okay, this is it. if this is how the rest of my life is going to be, no energy, different diagnoses after different diagnoses, I was just going to accept it and just deal with it and live with it and stop trying to chase down an answer, because over 10 years that really had gotten me nowhere. So I kind of gave up and accepted my situation. And then again, I saw MAP and I thought, well, okay, one last try. So like I said, I scoured the websites and I thought, well, it's worth a try. So I signed up for some sessions with you, and the rest is history. After that first session, I knew this was it. This was the real deal.
Wow. Wow. What was it about that session that made you realize this was something different? I mean, you mentioned somatic work and counseling. What was it about engaging with a one-on-one, live MAP session with a practitioner that really made you realize there's something different about this?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and I will mention too, I've tried many other modalities as well, EMDR and tapping and all kinds of things. But that first session, I would say I was optimistically skeptical.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was hoping it would work, but after all my failed attempts at everything else, I wasn't sure it was really going to work. But during that first session, I still remember it very well. And I remember what we were working on. It was an emotion. And I'm not really a person that sees things in my mind. Some people really see things, in their mind's eye, so to speak. I'm not really like that. But that first session, I did. It wasn't something like I conjured up on my own, because I kind of like sometimes during these sessions, you can kind of zone out and zone in. And it's not like hypnosis. It's just, you're just so relaxed. And I kind of remember zoning out, and I could hear your voice, and I thought, oh, wait a minute, what are we working on again? I was, talking to myself kind of, even though you were still talking. And so I tried to focus again what we were working on. And that's kind of when I saw something in my mind's eye, like totally switch. And I was like, oh my goodness, what just happened? It was amazing. And then like over the next few days, I distinctly remember taking a walk and talking to a friend of mine. And I was trying to explain, like, I don't know how to explain this, like scientifically, but I physically felt lighter. Like I just can't explain it. It was like I was carrying around, a 20-pound backpack, and all of a sudden that was gone. And that really was pretty crazy to me. I guess it was just a freeing up of energy that had been bound up with what we had worked on and treated and neutralized. And that since that was gone, I just felt so much lighter. It was crazy. And I noticed a difference even that night after the first session. I was happier. I laughed easier. And at that time in my life, that was not really happening. And so, yeah, it was just amazing. And I know not everybody has a first session like that, but for me, I could tell like something happened. This was worth pursuing.
Yeah, that's amazing. When that happens, of course, because it's a 1 hour session.
Yes.
I mean, right? It's 1 hour. We usually pick something. I want you to be able to feel the difference between the beginning and the end of the session. So usually the topic is like a painful emotional memory. And I just looked back in your file to see what that was. Yeah, we worked on it's kind of a sad memory, right? About a remark that your son made.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think you're right. So many people use that word, lighter. I feel lighter by the end of a session. And sometimes it takes maybe 24 hours to feel lighter. But so often people mention that is probably the most common response that I get. Like I just feel lighter. And they didn't even realize that they were feeling heavy, but there is something that they can sense kinesthetically that has changed in them. It's I think it's just a perfect metaphor or analogy for how like working with the mind, really the our thoughts and our emotions has a physical counterpart as well, right? It changes the way you feel. And it's even though we're just working with a painful emotional memory and maybe the thoughts behind that, it affects people on an emotional, mental, and physical level. And I think that's always very surprising for people. Not that that is always apparent as a result of a given session, every single time, right? This can be pretty subtle, but I do think that over the cumulative effect of several sessions is emotional, mental, and physical shifts that people can perceive. They do report exactly what you're describing there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so amazing to see that connection. You read about that connection and you kind of even intellectually or intuitively can say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But to actually experience it, it was, I can't even put words to it. It was so amazing. And the people that have known me for a long time, they could see a difference as well.
Yeah.
Even after those first few sessions.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you were hoping to address, with sessions and what you have observed as a result.
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, I was hoping, once and for all to get rid of the trauma that my body was storing, because I really believe that our body does hold on to those negative memories, negative feelings, and all that stuff. And really just to get rid of the chronic fight, flight, freeze response, which I'd realized at this point, I'd been living like that for most, if not all of my life. And so those were my hopes, right? Because like I said, the other modalities that I tried, so many different modalities, they were supportive and they could get me by from week to week. And when I didn't do them, I could notice kind of a downward, trajectory, but they weren't healing. They weren't healing the root. They weren't helping get rid of the trauma. And so, yeah, after the first few sessions, I mean, even after I look back at my notes and after our second session, so really our first full regular MAP session, I noticed one of my triggers really didn't affect me. And that was really amazing to me because this particular trigger would really send me down in a downward spiral. And I was like totally fine. Like it totally didn't affect me. And this was just huge. I mean, this was a huge impact, positive impact on my life. So, I just started after the first few sessions, I started to feel like I was getting to know myself better. I realized through my work with you and just through your general coaching too, that, I was living my life in such a small way. And chronic illness can do that, right? Because you are physically unable to do a lot in a practical way. But even that just really transferred to mentally, right? And just mentally, I was living my life in such a small way. And after my first, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 sessions, I just feel like I woke up and I didn't really have those constraints anymore, mentally at least. And I remember like talking to you like, oh my goodness, I feel like I have so much confidence. I thought I was confident before. Apparently I wasn't, because now I really truly feel confident. And I was starting to do things and explore things for this next phase of my life as my kids, have gone off to college. And before I could never really even, go there. I couldn't really even imagine doing anything. Again, one, because of my physical limitations, but two, just all the negative whatever is going on in my head. And for the first time, it just felt like all of that kind of dissolved and kind of fell away. And I just felt like the world was my oyster. Okay, what am I going to do? Let's explore a few options, And the big thing for me, or another big thing I should say, was after my 6th session with you, I had brain fog for 10 years. And I used to be an avid reader, homeschooled our kids, and, reading out loud was a big part of that. And it got to the point where I couldn't even read out loud to my kids because my brain fog was so bad. I couldn't remember what I just read, that type of stuff. And that was really, really also sad for me, right? Because they loved the read out loud times. Anyway, so this brain fog was really, really severe and it affected, all facets of my life. And after our 6th session together, it totally went away. And we did not work on that specifically. So I want to stress that. We did not say, okay, we're going to work on your brain fog. It just went away. And again, I'm just kind of speechless. It's like, how does that work? I mean, I kind of understand, but really, that was amazing. People are like, do you think you're physically getting better? I said, well, my brain fog went away after 6 sessions. And, a lot of doctors will say that's inflammation of some sort. That was life-changing for me. And that's really when I felt like, wow, I am a different person than I was, a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
That was huge. And then, other improvements I've seen, sleep. We have worked specifically on sleep for, I don't know, 2 or 3 sessions, I think, different, sprinkled through. And then you provide the audio subliminals for your clients. And so I faithfully listen to the sleep subliminal every night for, I don't know, several months maybe. And I don't need to anymore because my sleep is improved. So my sleep isn't 100% perfect. I don't know if anybody's is, but I just don't feel like that's one of my areas that I struggle anymore, and again, that just kind of, I think, like you said, the cumulative effect of the sessions, it just keeps working and you just keep improving. And then in general, I just feel like things that used to bother me just don't bother me anymore. It's weird, and again, nothing that we work on specifically. It's just, again, the cumulative effects of the sessions. I'm not triggered. And all of that frees me just to concentrate on moving forward instead of being irritated in the present or being irritated about something in the past or sad or whatever. It's like so much freedom, to live your life in the here and now. And yeah, again, nothing that we worked on specifically in terms of that kind of theme, that just happened naturally.
Yeah, I know. It is kind of, sometimes it's hard for people who are listening to this podcast to kind of figure out, well, what is it that they worked on, right? I mean, it isn't like there's a sequence of MAP topics or topics that we take on in MAP sessions, aside from the first one where I limit people to a phobia, a trigger for anxiety, or a painful emotional memory. Most often it's a painful emotional memory, right? Because we need to take a kind of discrete topic for your introductory sessions, a shorter session, and we want to be able to feel the difference by the end of the session. And the only way we can do that is if we're working with something that sort of has painful emotions tied to it that you can report on again by the end of the session. Okay, thinking about that same event. Now, how does it feel to you now? But in our other sessions, which were 90 minutes, a regular session is, for me, in my practice, is a 90-minute session over Zoom. We just take the topic that feels most important to you that day. It may be that there's a certain symptom that's really, bothering you or limiting you. It may be that there's some interpersonal relationship or some trauma memory from the past that you feel like you just want to be free from. You want to be able to change your relationship to that situation from the past, so it doesn't haunt you anymore. So it doesn't keep playing kind of subconsciously in your mind. Whatever that is, people want to work on certain personality traits. They don't want to be a people pleaser anymore. They don't want to procrastinate anymore, or they have certain compulsions or obsessions that they want to work with. I mean, whatever it is, we take that as the subject of the session. And I can't say that everything's, every topic is resolved in one session. As you said, we worked with sleep a few times. We can work with any topic sequentially. For people who come to see me for exactly one specific thing, then we just work with that same topic session after session. But we don't have to. We can kind of jump around, and we do say that's basically what we've done. You've had now 17 sessions. We've probably hit a lot of different topics, right?
Yes. And I remember distinctly one that was one of the most impactful sessions. We started out about something pretty benign. I mean, I grew up with not a lot of money. So I said, maybe I probably have some wrong thoughts about money. Maybe we should work on that. And you said, okay. So we started with that. But then, through the session, you give my my superconscious commands, and I'm just listening, and something else totally different came up. And it was what I thought was not related to money at all. And so I told you, I said, well, this isn't really related, but this is what came up. And so, our mind brings up things that we need to work on, right? And so then we kind of switched gears a little bit, worked on that. And that was that whole living small thing. It was, some childhood memories, and I would have never guessed in a million. And it was a memory I hadn't thought about in, 40 years. But having worked on that memory, and I didn't know it at the time, of course, how impactful that was going to be, but we worked on that. And even through your coaching, which, you're wonderful at, you just really helped me to see how that could potentially, connect to my present life and how that maybe has played out in my life. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that through my whole life. And so we worked on that. And that's really when I felt a lot of chains kind of come off. I don't need to live small. I wasn't made to live small. And that was really impactful. So all that to say, things can come up during the session that you're not even thinking about at the beginning of the session. And it turns out, like in my case, that particular session turned out to be tremendous and have a huge impact on me. So I think a lot of it's trusting the process. I mean, yes, for sure, come with your list of topic ideas, that you want to work on for sure. But, realize and be open to the fact that things may kind of, ebb and flow and maybe even change a little bit during the session, and just to go with it.
Yeah, I do think that, because we're working with the subconscious mind in sessions, and as we proceed through a session, I have you focus on an example of whatever your topic is. So if it's about sleep, it'll be like, okay, focus on what it felt like to be lying there awake during the night, last night or whatever. What are the thoughts that were going through your head? What are the emotions you were feeling? Your subconscious mind starts to show you the connections, the associations, even as you're focusing on that experience. And so that can bring up other memories, other concerns, other emotions, right? Sensations in the body, right? These are all little clues, because the subconscious mind, which runs all the systems of our body, can get hung up on things, and it can also associate things that we would never associate with our rational thinking minds, our frontal cortex. That is the realm of the subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind is a habit mind, it's a pattern mind, it's an associative mind. This is a neural net, and so it makes associations that aren't apparent to us, but they can bubble to the surface in a way when we are in a quiet, meditative state. And I would say that this MAP sessions are really a meditative process, right? This is not hypnosis. It's not NLP. It's not EMDR. It's not tapping. It's not any of those things. It is, I would say, it's like a great step forward, I think, for many of those techniques. I don't know, it just takes it to another level. And so we can find these associations, and when we see them, when we understand them, then we can work with them. And as you're describing, sometimes something that doesn't seem like big, or a memory that was buried from long ago, that wasn't even one of the major trauma memories that you had identified, right? You had sent me a whole list of trauma memories. This wasn't probably on the list. And so even that, right? It's like the mind has given that a significance. And that significance can be something that is still running you today. It's just like become part of the operating system of your mind. You don't know this, but when something like that comes up in a session and we can work with it, that can start to change things for you at a fundamental level. As you said, like it had connections to different aspects of your life. You felt like, as you described it, the chains starting to drop. Limits that you weren't even aware of, mental constructs or whatever that you weren't even aware of, started to shift, maybe even dissolve, so that you could relate to your life differently.
Well, that's exactly right. And I just think it boils down to kind of, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so that's exactly what you kind of just explained. I didn't know that I was living my life so small, in such a small way, mentally, let's say. I didn't know I actually did lack confidence. I really didn't know who I was. Like I didn't know any of this until we started neutralizing these memories, these beliefs, these thought patterns. And yeah, it's just so amazing. I know you describe it as a quantum leap, ahead of any other modality that's out there. And I 100% believe that's true. It is unlike anything. And I've tried almost everything that's out there. And what I love is, you don't lose those memories, those negative memories, or the events that happened in your life, but it just becomes very kind of muted and faded. And I can still remember, like, our first session when we worked on what my son said to me, and it had to do with my illness, or my general health status. And and whatever he said, it just made me sad. He was a little boy and he said something, "Mommy, why don't you smile anymore?" And bless his heart, that was just a genuine question he had. Why don't you smile anymore? And that made me so sad. And I didn't even realize how sad it made me until I talked to you. And when I actually talked to you about it, I was like crying, telling you about this memory. And I'm like, why am I crying? Because I can think about it and I don't cry. But when I spoke it out loud to you, I mean, I couldn't even, I couldn't even get through it. And during that first session, it just neutralized. And I can still see that memory of him saying that to me, but I have no like emotional intensity anymore associated to that memory. And that's true even in the beginning when my physical health was not yet improving, right? I just had no, it was like kind of a faded black and white movie, like I just didn't have any reaction to that memory. And I can obviously talk about it without crying. It's like totally neutralized. So it's there. So some people wonder, like, oh, are you erasing memories? No, we're not erasing memories. It's still there. There's just no negative emotional attachment to it anymore. And so therefore, it doesn't really impact your current thinking, your behavior, your thoughts. And that's I guess what I mean by the freedom, right? You're not constrained, like you said, by all of those patterns or thoughts or feelings. They're just not there anymore.
Yeah. And getting back to, how you describe feeling lighter, even after that first session, I think what people have to understand is that with the MAP method, we are harnessing the power of the subconscious mind, right? That was a sad memory for you. And what we're asking the subconscious mind to do in a session is to find all the related memories. So just because we worked on that one memory, it doesn't mean that we just neutralized one memory, right? We are asking the subconscious mind to find all associated memories. So there may be many other hundreds or even thousands of other memories that also are associated with a feeling of sadness that your subconscious mind has associated to that memory, and amplify the feeling of sadness around that memory. And so I kind of see it as a batch process, and I think that is why people describe feeling lighter. It's almost like that memory, whatever painful emotional memory you pick for your first session, is like a target memory. It's like we're saying to your subconscious mind, see this memory, see how this feels. I want you to look for all the other ones that are associated to it. And so there is an association structure of many other memories. And when all of those are neutralized as a batch, that's where you can feel lighter, right? Because it's almost like an emotional burden that you've been carrying, but you didn't even realize you were carrying, becomes neutralized. All of a sudden, that isn't there anymore. And there's more, I don't know, peace. What you said, you felt a little happier. It was easier to laugh, right? It's like some kind of emotional burden was released, was somehow fully, I like to think of it more as like fully processed, right? Because when we have traumas, these are experiences that are kind of frozen in time. They are held somewhere in the body mind, we can think of it as. And when they are neutralized, when that emotion, which we've kind of frozen and held, can be viewed and neutralized, like fully processed, then we aren't carrying it around anymore. And that can be a very freeing experience, just like you described after your first session. So although you come with one memory, it doesn't mean that, right, that the extent of the improvement or the extent of the neutralization is only focused on the one memory.
Right. And I think that's what really makes MAP. So I just say it's beautifully simple because, like you say, you focus on one memory, but it is neutralizing and handling all associated memories. And, we have memories we don't remember. So if we had to work on every single memory, well, that list is exhaustive for anybody, probably. So it's just so beautifully simple and effective.
Yeah. And I mean, as a practitioner, and you've had this experience now too, it's wonderful, to witness the changes that people can experience, even in the session. I always start the next session by asking, what shifts have you noticed as a result of our previous session? But, so there's usually more that can be reported, but I mean, even within the session, even from the beginning to the end, it's just wonderful to be able to witness the shifts, the changes that people can make. And it's often emotional, it's often attitudinal, or our perspective, our mindset on something gets shifted during the session. And then the effects of that play out over the next, say, 2-3 weeks until you have your next session. And I think that's what is meant to happen. That's why at the end of every session, I'm always asking your subconscious mind, what is the interval we should allow here before we meet again? And I think that is the purpose of that spacing, is just, when we can create a shift in the mind, when we can move from that sympathetic dominant state to more of a parasympathetic state, when we can relieve some aspect of that fight or flight reaction that's going on, that's being sustained by the mind, then the benefits of that emotionally, mentally, and physically, just take a little time to kind of show up in our lives.
I do remember in the beginning, because again, being used to, say, a talk therapy model, right? I remember coming to see you, and I think it was after the first session, if not for sure, like the second and third, I would say to my husband, well, she doesn't really hardly know anything about me. She hasn't asked if I'm married. She hasn't asked how many kids I have. Like, it's so different than sitting down with a counselor. Okay, tell me about your life. Let's get to know each other. It's not like that. And yeah, it's so different. And you don't need to know all of that, right? As a practitioner, you just need to know what the client wants to work on, and you go right there and you work on it, and it works. And that I'm not trying to, diss counseling or anything. It can be very helpful for awareness, for understanding, to learn coping mechanisms and learn communication skills. There's lots of benefits for counseling, but it doesn't heal the root problem, right? This is the only thing that by far has ever even come close to healing, and it's way more effective than I had ever even hoped. Yeah, it's so different. It's so different than talk therapy. This is actually a real healing modality.
Yeah. Yes, I think people don't understand the impact that their mind has on their physical state, right? So we are taught from childhood in this culture, if you've got something physically wrong with you, you have to use a physical method to alleviate that. And so here we are going from doctor to doctor, practitioner to practitioner, trying to find something physical, surgery, pills, physical therapy to cure our ills. I think in many cases, disregarding the role of the psyche, the mind, our thoughts and emotions. It's unfortunate that our culture around healthcare has gone so far in that direction. I'm not saying that you shouldn't pursue traditional methods of finding relief for your health problems. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if you haven't also incorporated a method of working with your mind, whether it's the MAP method or something else, then you are probably not optimizing your ability to recover, because it is your mind that is running your body. And when we, I want to really distinguish between acute health, when you break a bone, if you're having a heart attack, absolutely, you want the urgent care or the ER, right? But when we are talking about chronic symptoms, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, chronic symptoms of any type, we're talking about something that has really gone on for a long time, even after the original injury or the original diagnosis or the original whatever has been treated. This tells us there's something going on in the mind. And by working with the mind, we can help to unburden the mind of the things that are keeping it stuck, right? Because we are all capable of healing ourselves. If I get a wound, I can rely on my body to heal the wound. If I get sick, I can trust that my immune system is going to deal with that and I will be healthy again at some point, right? But when these things aren't coming to fruition, right? When healing is just taking months and years, then there's something going on in the mind that we should be looking at. So that's kind of how I see, using the MAP method as something that's complementary to traditional, alternative, holistic healing practices. Because why not? Why not check into what's going on in the mind when it is your mind that is running all the systems of the body?
Yes, exactly. And I think when I looked at your website in the beginning, and I don't know if it was from your website or just from talking with you, like you said, our bodies are designed to heal. And we're not really made to have chronic illnesses. Like that's not, but I feel like in our culture today, so many people do. And so we just kind of accept it, right? Like, oh, I can't eat gluten and I can't do this and I have leaky gut and I have this chronic condition and this chronic condition. And we just accept it because there's so much of it. And, I totally agree that our bodies are designed to heal. And as you kind of, however you phrased it, whenever we talked or I read it on your site, if our bodies aren't healing, something is blocking the healing. Well, what could possibly be blocking the healing? It has to be something in our mind. And again, that really dovetailed nicely with what I had already come to my own conclusion. It was something about getting rid of trauma, getting rid of all this negative, memories and stuff. And also what my doctors were starting to tell me. And I was like, yeah, this totally makes sense. So that's why I say this is the real deal. I just can't stop talking about MAP because this really is, in my mind, the only effective way to deal. And it's not like you have to have a huge trauma history, right? It could just be, like you said, a phobia or a mindset barrier. Maybe you lack confidence and you want more confidence, or you have a repetitive thought. I mean, it could be anything negative that you want to get rid of. This does it. And that's amazing to me.
Yeah. I mean, people come to see me because they have that inner critic, that like inner voice that's constantly, badgering them or, yeah. I mean, people come for all kinds of anxiety, social anxiety, performance anxiety, health anxiety. I mean, I work with people aside from, my primary work, which is with people with chronic symptoms and conditions. I mean, yeah, even just working with anxiety is helpful. That is something that we can address by working with the subconscious mind, finding the roots of that and changing your responses to these situations. Maybe you can talk a little bit about at what point you realized that this is something that you wanted to do yourself.
Oh, yes. I'm currently in the certification program to become a MAP practitioner myself. Loving it. So I started seeing you like around the 1st of December, 2022. And I mean, right from the get-go, I mean, the brain fog didn't lift for a few sessions, but right from the get-go, I was noticing improvements. And again, because my kids are out of the house now, thinking, what am I going to do this next phase of my life? And starting to see some improvements already in those first few sessions. The Coaching Institute, they do open houses every so often for people that are interested in the certification program to come and get their questions answered. So I thought, well, I'll just go. I love information. Like, I love data. I love to learn. So I thought I'll just go and hear what they're saying. And so I went to the first one. And then they had another one, I think 2 months later. And by that time, I was really seeing some significant improvements from our sessions. And so then I was like, is this what I wonder if this is what I'm meant to do. And so I went to that second open house. I didn't really learn anything new. I mean, it was just a repeat, which was fine. But I think at that moment, so that would have been, I think I'd have to look back. I think that was February. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, late winter, early spring. I thought, this, I think, is what I'm meant to do. It didn't take much thinking on my part. And, it's a financial investment, obviously, like any education is, but I really didn't even think twice about it, because it was like, this is it. This is what I meant to do. I have personally experienced a transformation. I love to help people. I want to help people. And this is the real deal, right? Like, this, this is the real deal. So I just jumped on board the 1st of April, or somewhere in April, and classes started in May. And yeah, I haven't looked back.
Wow.
Yeah, I just full steam ahead. And then it was funny because I have a friend. She was actually one of the modalities. She's a masseuse. So she had seen me for several years, every week, done myofascial massage on me. And so she knew me quite well. And she now she lives out of state now, but we would talk a couple times a year, And so it was right after I signed up, and the class was almost going to start. And she texted me and she said, hey, just thinking about you, wondering how it's going. And I said, I was just thinking about you too. I have some exciting news to tell you. And she said, well, do you want to talk today? I said, sure. Do you want to do Zoom? And she later told me it was kind of funny because we never do Zoom. We just talk audio on the phone. Again, I think that's that confidence piece even, really. And so we Zoomed, and we ended up talking for 2.5 hours. And I told her all about MAP. I told her all about my personal experience. I mean, this is the whole phone call, right? And I told her how excited I am to start this. And she, so she was very excited for me and heard all about it. And then I think that night or the next day, she said, I'm going to join too. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. Don't you want to research? I'm the researcher, right? Don't you want to research it, spend a few hours on the website? She goes, no. She said, I listened to you. I know you. I couldn't help you all those years. This has actually helped you. Kind of the proof is in the pudding, right? She's like, and I visually saw you on Zoom. And she said, I could literally see a difference, and I could hear a difference in your voice. So that was exciting to me. I mean, I'm super happy to have her in the class with me, and we're classmates, but I'm just, people could see, right? Like, that's just more proof to me that this works. It's not like all in my head, so to speak. Like, I really have gone through a transformation, and other people can see it that have known me for a long time. So that was really exciting to me too.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing I find really exciting is that, probably when we first met last December, you couldn't have thought about doing a program like this.
Well, absolutely not. Because number one, I couldn't read a book. So I had no focus, right? I couldn't concentrate for very long with the brain fog. So absolutely, I couldn't have done this before MAP. And then just the confidence to, everything, to be on Zoom, to have my voice heard, to know that I can help other people. Just everything. The reason I can become a MAP practitioner is because of MAP. It really saved me in a lot of respects, from the trajectory that I was on. I just feel like a whole new door has been opened. It's incredible.
Yeah. It is. Because, training to be a MAP practitioner is a commitment and for 6 or 7 months. Yeah, it's a significant commitment. So you feeling like you could, sign up for a program like that and commit to that, that's a big step,
Yeah. And as you say that, I'm thinking, yeah, it was really like a no-brainer for me. I was like, and I think again, because my mind was clear at that point, brain fog was gone. I was like, yeah, this is it. This is what I've been searching for me personally, and for that next stage of life. What am I going to do with my life? So yeah, I don't know what else to say. It's just, it's unbelievable, really.
Yeah, well, I'm very, very happy for you. And, we need more MAP practitioners. We need more MAP practitioners that believe that they can use this modality to help people with their physical health. It's kind of a small group right now, but I think it has a lot of promise for people who are interested in working with those with chronic illness.
Well,
Yeah.
and like you said, with anything, I mean, yeah, it works for everything.
Yes. Well, and that is not to say that it works in one session.
Right.
Expectations here. Yeah. I always caution people, I say it's not a miracle, right? MAP is not a miracle. It's a process. And so, you have to be, in a sense, you have to be committed to that process. For people who think I can just sign up for one session and have this problem disappear, like I don't think that's the right mindset to go in with, because as you said, it's not a direct process. In some way, it's a very indirect process, and it can take a few sessions to find all of the roots. And you have to kind of be open to that process too. You have to be open to sharing what is coming up in your mind during these little meditations that we do. You do have to listen to me talking to your superconscious mind. We call it the superconscious. We've kind of promoted it because we've realized that the subconscious is not subservient to our conscious mind. In fact, it is the other way around. The subconscious mind is a very powerful level of mind that, we haven't really had a good way of tapping into. And I do think that with the MAP method, we now have a gentle but effective way of accessing the subconscious mind in a way that doesn't make a person feel like they've given up control to somebody else, which I think was the problem with hypnosis. Also, not everyone makes a very good hypnotic subject. And the other thing I've heard from other practitioners that I've worked with who are hypnotists, that have been my clients, hypnosis can help you access things. It can help you have insights about why you are, or how, why you react in a certain way, but it doesn't necessarily heal it. And so he thought it was pretty cool that with the MAP method, we don't even have to have that clear an idea of what the original injury or insult was, what we call that original event. We don't have to know, but the subconscious mind can find it and heal it. And it can happen without like any fanfare. Like some people worry, like, oh my gosh, if I come to see you and I've always suspected that, I was sexually abused, and, am I going to have to like deal with those memories? No, you don't. Your subconscious mind sometimes shows you a few key memories, like maybe it's showing you something like that it's neutralizing, because maybe it's important for you to make that connection for closure or something. But no, it doesn't mean that a whole bevy of unrecognized traumas are going to have to come up in your mind and re-traumatize you. It's not like that either. Do you want to just comment on that from your own experience?
Sure. Well, first of all, that was very interesting what you said about the hypnotist who was your client. That's very interesting, because in years past, my husband's like, maybe you should try hypnosis. And I was like, I had, again, as you said, I had an issue with that whole trust thing. Like, I don't really want a stranger to have access to my subconscious. I said, you're going to have to sit in on every session because and listen to what they say, right? Because I don't know this person from anybody. And so I never did try that myself. But that's interesting what your client said, that hypnosis doesn't actually heal. So again, just goes back to what I say, like, this is the only thing that I found that heals. So yes, I agree. I think it's like I said, I think MAP is beautifully simple, and it's, like you said, it's gentle because you don't have to relive all the details of whatever trauma memory you want to work on, or negative memory, or negative event, or insult, or it could be, sometimes the smallest things, like we talked about earlier, end up sticking with us, and our minds kind of form these beliefs around something, some small insult, and we start believing something about ourselves or the world or other people. And it just becomes, and then something else happens and reinforces it. And all of a sudden we have this big belief and we don't even know where it came from. But yeah, like that's what I tell other people too, like in the example of a woman perhaps that was sexually assaulted, maybe she does remember it, right? But you don't have to, it's not like talk therapy. You don't have to, or it's not like EMDR where you have to focus on the event as your eyes are going back, focus, because I tried EMDR. I mean, first of all, it's kind of hard to focus on something so negative and so emotionally intense for so long. That's even a hard exercise in and of itself. And it wasn't for sexual assault, it was for something different, but still it was very difficult. And so MAP is so gentle because you don't have, this is how I tell people, like, okay, let's say there was a woman that was sexually assaulted. She doesn't have to bring it up and tell me all the details and really relive that memory. Your mind is bringing up all those details because your mind remembers, right? You have all those memories. And so you're just recalling, okay, yep, that happened. That's what we're going to work on. And it's so gentle in that way.
You don't even have to go, you don't, if so, for a known trauma, which is what that you're giving now, all she has to remember is a little bit about maybe what she was wearing that day, or just remembering where she was. She doesn't have to even go into the actual event, right? We're just trying to get the subconscious mind to that place and time. Anything else that she doesn't want to have to think about or look at, she doesn't need to, because that's enough. That's enough. We can get the subconscious mind to that place and time, and it does the rest on its own. It's kind of automagical that way.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. But to your point about unknown traumas or unknown events, I also try to explain it like this, maybe you're anxious every time you get in a car and you don't know why.
Yeah.
Well, maybe this is all just, maybe you were in a car accident when you were a toddler and you don't remember. I would call that the original event, right? The root memory. And I picture like all of our memories are connected kind of with threads, right, to that root memory. And you don't have to remember that, you're unable to remember that root memory. You were too young. And so all you have to remember is, okay, let's talk about the time you were anxious in a car, or there was a near miss of an accident, or somebody, so-and-so was driving, just recall that. And then I just love how MAP works on that, neutralizing that memory and all the associated memories to that. And that's why it's so wonderful, so effective. And it can neutralize, like you said, batches of memories at a time. It's really incredible.
Yeah. And the example that, as you're talking about that, the example that I get more often is the person who is rageful in the car.
Oh.
If someone does anything, comes into their lane without signaling that they feel it was like they couldn't predict it, or it just feels like a little bit threatening, or it sends them into a rage. They don't know why. And that kind of thing we can also work with in a MAP session. So it's like any response that you're having that you recognize is kind of irrational, it's like too much for the situation at hand. That is a signal that there is something else, some other trauma event, or painful emotional memory from the past that is contributing to your emotional reaction in the present. So all we have to know is how you are reacting to that situation in the present that feels sort of out of control to you. And we let the subconscious mind trace that back.
Right.
To neutralize all of the associated events.
Well, and that's just so funny as we're talking and you gave that example of road rage. I wouldn't say that I'm a person that has road rage or had road rage, but I would get angry, people cut you off or whatever. And as you were talking, I was like, I am a much more mellow driver now. Like that stuff I didn't even realize it until just now when we were talking. Again, we never worked on anything like about that. But all of these, like you say, the cumulative effect of these MAP sessions, and things just kind of dissolve and go away.
leaving you with more inner peace.
Absolutely. I didn't even realize that until just now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing that people have to understand, right? It's like with the MAP method, we don't have to go into every single little thing. Like you gave me a long list of traumas that, you thought might be instrumental to work with. It's not like we sat down and said, okay, there are X number of things on this list. We're going to have X number of sessions to deal with each and every one of these. We didn't do that. Even for the people who are very severely traumatized, many of them, never come up with a list. For me, that's okay. Like that's not an essential part of working with a MAP practitioner, because your mind will bring up what is important for this topic that you've chosen for this session. The mind will just go there. And sometimes your practitioner helps you with that a little bit. We pick up something like, seems like there's a childhood memory at play here, maybe something around this age. Essentially all we're doing is we're muscle checking ourselves to help you figure out what it might be. But even if that doesn't like bring up a memory for you, you don't have a memory kind of flash through your mind, that's okay. We just send the subconscious mind looking, and that is often enough.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And like you say, I made that big list for you. I haven't looked at that list in a couple months. I think in the beginning, after our first few sessions, I was like, oh, well, we got to get to this and we got to get to this. I don't feel that sense of urgency. And I'll probably, after our conversation, I'll probably go find that list and just see like, does any of this really resonate with me anymore? I'm guessing most of it doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't feel an attraction to that list of traumas anymore. I don't feel like, oh, we got to work on this, because I think probably, again, from the cumulative effect of our sessions, things are just kind of taken care of.
Yeah. And of course, you've had more sessions than just the sessions you've had with me, right? Now you're doing all these practice sessions and with other students as part of the certification program. You've done group sessions through the MAP Coaching Institute. So there's all of that too, right?
Right.
So, and you've also used the MAP for Sensitivities program, so there are recorded sessions that you worked with there. So you've had a lot of different experiences of MAP. But I just want to get back to one of the original themes that you talked about at the beginning, because I think that this is a really fascinating connection. And I just, having had all of this experience now with MAP sessions, both being the client and now being a student in the certification program, you talked about the connection between a trauma history, and chronic illness. You talked about, this chronic illness specialist that recognized, like, yeah, 80 to 90% of my patient base has a significant trauma history. We know from the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, that there is definitely a correlation that the CDC has recognized between childhood trauma before the age of 18 or so and lifetime risk of sudden death from any cause, chronic illness, mental illness, addictions, and on and on. We've seen that there's this correlation, but how do you understand it now, having gone through this process, both as a client and now learning it as a soon-to-be practitioner? Like, what is it that you understand about, working with traumas that is helpful for physical, emotional, mental health as well?
Well, the way I kind of put it together and understand it is, when you have these traumas, however many, right? Or however extensive your history is, part of your subconscious is kind of still living in those traumas.
Mm.
Let's say you had a trauma when you were 4, part of your subconscious is still thinking it's 4 years old and living in that trauma. And I know that might sound kind of weird to some people, but really that's what's happening. And then you had a trauma when you were 6, and then you had a trauma when you were 10 or whatever. And if you don't find a way to release those traumas, right, your subconscious, the way I understand it, is still operating at those ages or in those times, And so the way I see the link between this and physical health is that it's using up all this energy. I mean, we know thoughts are energy, we know feelings are energy. I think scientists have measured, you can measure energy right? From happy thoughts versus negative thoughts, and happy emotions versus negative emotions. And you can measure these energies. And so the way I kind of understand it is that these parts of our subconscious are holding on and kind of still living in all that trauma. And that's taking energy that your body would naturally use to heal itself, right? When it gets out of balance, it would use energy to get back into balance, whatever condition that is, or, situation. So when we can dissolve those parts that are holding on to those trauma memories or negative memories, whatever you want to call it, it just frees up the energy. And I think that's where that lightness comes in, where people feel physically lighter. That energy is now let go and it's now available to use, right? And so then I feel like, okay, now our body can use that energy to heal like it's supposed to, instead of being kind of locked up in those jails of continually, ruminating on that trauma. Not that we're trying to do that, not that we're consciously thinking about that trauma. That's why it's called the subconscious, right? We're not even aware of it. And so again, we don't know what we don't know. So if these things are back there, I say back there, like subconscious, if they're in there and they're still holding on to that trauma, and that's, I guess, what I mean when I say, I feel like our bodies hold on to trauma. It's still there. It hasn't been dealt with. Yeah, it's taking the energy reserves that our body would normally use to heal. And so when we can dissolve that, then that allows our body to heal. I mean, that's how I think of it. Maybe that's really simplistic, but
yeah, no, I think that's a good way of thinking about it. I mean, I do think that trauma is held in the body mind, and that the accumulation of both small, like everyday little incidents, small and large traumas, kind of forms blocks to healing. And so as these blocks are being dissolved through a set of MAP sessions, I think it is freeing up more energy that the body can use in a positive way, which is to get on with these projects that it has sort of put to the wayside for a while. I also think that, trauma experiences kind of establish negative responses for us. And when those patterns break down, then we can relate to life in a more positive, at least neutral to positive way going forward. So again, there is less of that, negative mental activity going on, which your subconscious mind reads as threat, keeping us in that stress response. Because when we are in that stress response, fight, flight, freeze, as you described it earlier, the body is using the resources that we have, our life energy, our, all of our resources, to prepare for an emergency. And this is taking away, it's diverting resources from all the restorative functions of the body, which is exactly what you need to heal, right? You need your immune system working well. You need detoxification to be happening. You need digestion to be happening. You need to get sufficient rest. You need to be able to take up nutrients from your food. You need to be able to maintain hormonal and fluid balance. And that is all dropped. That is all inhibited when we are gearing up for an emergency. So for that person that has been through a lot of trauma, there are a lot of triggers in everyday life that pull us towards that fight or flight response, thereby putting the brakes on healing processes. So again, through going through this process, we can start to dissolve those patterns of response and feel more at ease, more relaxed, more secure, which helps us to be in that parasympathetic more of the time. So that just means that more of our energy and our resources are being used for the purpose of healing instead of the purpose of running away. And that is also very conducive to recovering from chronic illness, because for a lot of people that are in that chronic illness place, there's a lot of internal struggle going on, emotionally and mentally, in addition to the actual physical symptoms that they're experiencing. Right. Even just working with that can, put us in a place to experience optimal healing.
Exactly. Yeah, everything. I agree with all that. And if you're in a place of chronic illness, that just that just helps keep you in that cycle, right? Because now you have all these negative thoughts about, oh, my life, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do all the things I need to do or want to do. And yeah, so and then you physically feel bad. And so you just have all these negative thoughts, right? And so it just perpetuates that whole cycle. You talk a lot about cycles in your work. And so once you can break out of that, that's really the beginning of healing.
Yeah, I think it really is. Yeah. So would you recommend the MAP method to others?
Absolutely. I think, this is what I tell everybody, I think it can help every single person on this earth. We all have something. We all don't have large trauma histories. I understand that, but we all have something. We all live in this world, right? I would venture to say all of us have some negative memory that pops up. If it's popping up and it happened a long time ago, that needs to be dealt with, right? That's still affecting you in some way. You probably don't know how it's affecting you, but it is if you're still thinking about it, whether it's somebody said something to you one time and it just really irked you and you're still thinking about it all these years later. I mean, it could be something as simple as that, right? Or it could be a physical thing, an accident or something that you think about, pops up. It could just be so many number of things. We all have something. I don't think it works for people that are really determined that this won't work, right? You have to be somewhat open. But like I said, for my first session, I was open yet cautious. And I personally had amazing results, and so you just have to be open. You can be skeptical. You just have to be open to the fact that it might work. Our minds are very powerful, right?
Yeah.
And so if you think something will work, there's a better chance it'll work. And if you think it won't work, well, it probably won't work. So yeah, I think it could help anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you have a sense of who you're hoping to work with once you get certified? What kind of client?
I don't yet. I've had a lot of practice clients so far, and that's been really wonderful and rewarding. It's just so rewarding to help anybody, really. And I said this to you before. It's amazing, like you say, to see the changes from the beginning of the session to the end of the session. I worked with a friend the other week, and by the end of the session, she was laughing, and she just felt like all this relief. And she said, "Is this normal?" And I said, "Well, yeah, it can be." And she ended up, and then went on over the next few days to have amazing results. And it surprises me when I get these updates from the clients. It surprises me in one sense, but then I'm like, well, it shouldn't surprise me because I know this works, right? Like I've experienced this. But to hear that somebody else, it's so gratifying. So I'm not really sure kind of what group I'm going to serve yet, but we'll see.
All right. Well, Susan, thank you so much for joining me today and having this conversation and sharing some of your story. And I really look forward to having you as a colleague.
Well, thank you very much, Madeline. Thank you for inviting me, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for the Flourish with Neural Retraining podcast. Please listen again and remember to follow us and leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Play, or Stitcher. Check out our free courses about the MAP method, how it works, and how we use it for mind-body healing at mapforhealth.us, or schedule your introductory session at mindremapforhealth.com. Until the next time, be well and flourish. Content of this podcast, copyright 2023 by Twin Cities Neural Retraining. Music by Barbara Ben.